Don't sign that contract. Maya Carter's voice was quiet, but the words stopped the room cold. Her hand hovered above the polished mahogany desk, one finger resting beside a paragraph most people would have overlooked. Across from her stood Nathaniel Brooks, the most powerful man in the room, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked as precise as his expression. 3 attorneys had spent 2 weeks reviewing the agreement. Victor Hale, Nathaniel's longtime business partner, had spent the last 10 minutes explaining why it was the best deal they would see all year. And yet Maya, a black maid who had been hired to keep the mansion spotless, had just told them not to sign it. Nathaniel slowly lifted his eyes from the contract. "Excuse me?" The question was calm.
Too calm.
Maya felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her hand steady. Around them, the library seemed suddenly enormous. Golden afternoon light stretched across the hardwood floor, catching dust motes above shelves filled with leather-bound books. The scent of cedar and coffee hung quietly in the air. Victor gave a short laugh. "Nathaniel, I think your housekeeper may have mistaken a business contract for a grocery list." One of the attorneys smiled politely. Maya lowered her eyes for half a second. She had learned that survival often meant knowing when to speak and when to disappear. For 3 months, she had moved through this mansion almost invisibly, carrying folded linens, polishing silver, and leaving rooms before important conversations began. But she had also learned something else. People revealed more when they believed nobody important was listening. Maya looked back at the document. "Section 8, paragraph 4, she said. "The language looks harmless, but it gives the other party control over the company's voting rights if there is a dispute." Victor's smile faded slightly. "That's not what it says." "Not directly," Maya replied. "That's why it works." Nathaniel reached for the contract. His fingers stopped just above the page. "Explain." Maya swallowed. She could feel every pair of eyes in the room turning toward her. She had promised herself she would never become visible here. Visibility had cost her too much before. But there was something about the wording that she could not ignore. "The clause says both parties must agree before control changes," she said. But the definition of a dispute appears 3 pages later. It allows one party to declare a dispute without the other party's approval. Once that happens, the voting provision takes effect. Silence settled over the room. Nathaniel looked toward his attorneys. Neither spoke. Maya pointed to another sentence. "And this part gives the arbitrator authority to interpret the dispute. The arbitrator is selected by the other side." Victor's expression had gone completely still. Nathaniel turned another page. Then another. His eyes moved faster. Maya watched him read, realizing she had crossed a line she could not uncross. Finally, Nathaniel closed the contract. "Who taught you to read agreements like this?" Maya hesitated. "Experience." Nathaniel studied her face. For the first time since she had entered his house, he was not looking at a maid. He was looking at a question. And Maya suddenly understood that the contract was no longer the most dangerous thing in the room. It was the truth she had just forced everyone to notice. 3 months earlier, Maya Carter had walked through the iron gates of Nathaniel Brooks's estate with $12 in her checking account and one simple goal: keep her life from falling apart. The mansion stood on nearly 4 acres outside Chicago, surrounded by trimmed hedges, stone pathways, and tall windows that reflected the gray morning sky. To Maya, it looked less like a home and more like a world she had been told she did not belong in. She had learned quickly that the staff had rules. Arrive before 6 in the morning. Finish every assigned room. Never enter Nathaniel's private office unless instructed. Never touch documents. Never ask questions about business. Most importantly, remain invisible. Maya had followed every rule. She polished silver without making noise, organized the library without opening a single book, and learned exactly when to leave a room before Nathaniel's meetings began. She did not mind being overlooked. In fact, she preferred it. Being overlooked meant nobody asked about the law degree she had once hoped to finish. Nobody asked why she had left a promising legal career before turning 30. Nobody asked why she carried a small notebook in her apron pocket and filled it with observations whenever she had a quiet moment. Her past was not something she wanted to explain. It was something she wanted to survive. Nathaniel rarely spoke to her beyond a brief instruction or a polite acknowledgement. He was known throughout the city as a disciplined businessman, but inside the mansion, his presence carried a different kind of weight. Conversations became quieter when he entered. Employees straightened their posture. Even experienced executives measured their words carefully around him. Maya had never been impressed by that kind of authority. She respected competence, not reputation. That was why the contract had caught her attention. It reminded her of the documents she had studied years ago, back when she had spent nights reading case files beneath fluorescent lights and believing that careful language could protect people from unfair decisions. She had been good at it. Very good. Then one case changed everything. A senior attorney had approved a questionable agreement and later blamed Maya for failing to identify a problem she had never been asked to review. The firm chose convenience over truth. Maya lost her position, and with it went the future she had spent years building. She never stopped studying, though. Every weekend, she visited the public library and read legal updates. Every evening, she practiced with old contracts. Knowledge had become the one thing nobody could take from her. Now, standing in Nathaniel's library, she wondered whether she had just made the same mistake again by speaking.
Viktor hala yaçet her karafulle.
You seem very confident for someone who was hired to manage a household. Maya felt the sting behind his words, but she did not answer immediately. Nathaniel did. Let her finish. The room became quiet again. Maya looked at him, surprised. He had not defended her. He had simply given her permission to continue. Somehow, that was more unsettling. She turned back to the contract.
There is another issue, she said.
Nathaniel's expression tightened. Where? Maya placed her finger near the bottom of the page.
Here.
The amendment schedule. Victor immediately reached for the papers, but Nathaniel stopped him with a single look. Maya continued. If I am right, the first clause is not meant to transfer control today. It is meant to create the conditions for transferring it later. Nathaniel stared at the document for several seconds. Then he asked the question Maya had been hoping he would never ask. How did a housekeeper notice something 3 attorneys missed? Maya looked down at her hands. For a moment, the old embarrassment returned. Then she lifted her eyes. Because I used to be the person in the room who was expected to notice things. Maya's answer remained in the room long after she finished speaking. Nathaniel Brooks leaned back slowly in his chair, his eyes fixed on the contract as if the pages had suddenly become something unfamiliar. Victor Hale was the first to break the silence. Formerly, he said with a faint smile. Apparently. Maya felt the word land exactly where he intended it to. Formerly. As if losing a career had erased everything she had learned. Nathaniel did not look at Victor. You said the amendment creates conditions for a later transfer, he said. Show me. Maya stepped closer to the desk. The polished wood reflected the warm light from the library windows, and for a moment, she could see her own reflection beside the expensive leather folders. She pointed to a paragraph near the end of the agreement. This section allows the other company to request a restructuring if certain financial targets are missed. Nathaniel nodded. That sounds standard. It would be, Maya said, if the targets were measured against the original operating budget. But they are not. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Then what are they measured against? A revised projection that they control. Victor's expression changed. Only slightly, but Maya noticed. She always noticed. That is an interpretation, Victor said.
No, Maya replied quietly.
It is a sequence. She turned to the next page. The First Amendment gives them authority to revise the projection. The second gives them the right to declare the revised target unmet. Then this clause allows them to request voting control until the dispute is resolved. Nathaniel reached for a pen. He did not sign. He began making notes in the margin. One of his attorneys moved closer, reading over his shoulder. That cannot be intentional, the attorney murmured. Maya looked at Victor. Maybe it is not. Victor gave her a measured smile. You have a suspicious mind. I have a careful one. Nathaniel looked up. Enough. The single word ended the exchange. He turned toward his attorneys. Verify every reference Maya mentioned. Start with the amendment schedule. The attorneys immediately began comparing pages. Victor remained standing beside the window, his hands folded calmly in front of him. Maya could feel the atmosphere changing. A few minutes earlier, she had been an employee standing near the edge of a conversation. Now, everyone was waiting for her observations. She did not enjoy the attention. Attention had never been what she wanted. She wanted accuracy. That was different. Nathaniel closed the contract and looked at her. "Why did you leave the legal field?" The question caught her off guard. Maya glanced toward the tall windows. Outside, the late afternoon sky had turned pale blue above the trees. "I did not exactly leave," she said. "I was pushed out." Nathaniel waited. She could have given him the simple version. She had made a mistake. She had lost her job. She had started over. But the truth was more complicated. "I found a problem in a case," she said. "Someone more senior than me decided it was easier to blame me than admit the problem existed." Victor's eyes shifted toward her. Maya noticed that too. "And you lost your position?" Nathaniel asked. "Yes." "Did you lose your license?" "No." Nathaniel's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Then why are you working here?" Maya looked down at the simple black uniform she wore every day. Because being qualified and being given a chance are not always the same thing. No one answered. Nathaniel looked at the contract again. Then his eyes returned to Maya. "I want to know exactly what you saw." Maya knew that question changed everything. She pulled out the chair across from his desk and sat down. For the first time, Nathaniel did not ask her to leave. Maya studied the contract again, but this time Nathaniel was watching her rather than the pages. The room had changed. The attorneys had stopped whispering, Victor had stopped smiling, and the quiet ticking of the brass clock on the mantel seemed louder than before. Maya traced the language with her eyes. "Careful not to rush. The problem is not one clause," she said. "It is how 3 clauses work together." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Start at the beginning." Maya turned the document toward him. "This agreement gives Victor's company the right to revise the projected operating budget every quarter." That sounds reasonable, but there is no independent review of those revisions. Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Continue." "Then the performance section measures your company against those revised projections. If the numbers fall short, the agreement allows Victor's company to request a restructuring." One of the attorneys looked up sharply. "And the restructuring provision? That is where the real problem begins," Maya said. "It gives the requesting party temporary voting authority while the dispute is being resolved." Victor finally stepped away from the window. "Temporary authority is not ownership." Maya looked at him. "No." "But the agreement never defines how long temporary authority can last." Victor's expression remained composed, but his voice became firmer. Any competent attorney would understand that the duration would be determined during arbitration. "Exactly," Maya said. "And who selects the arbitrator?" The room fell silent. Nathaniel turned toward one of his attorneys. "Who?" The attorney checked the agreement again. His face became serious. "The initiating party." Nathaniel looked back at Maya. She said nothing. She did not need to. The pieces were already visible. Victor's company could revise the projections, declare the targets unmet, request restructuring, receive temporary voting authority, and then influence the process that determined how long that authority lasted. Nathaniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. When he opened them, his expression was controlled again. How much control could they gain? Maya answered carefully. "Enough to block major decisions. Possibly enough to force a new ownership arrangement if the dispute remained unresolved." Victor shook his head. "That is an extreme interpretation." Nathaniel turned toward him. "Then you will not mind if we pause the agreement." Victor hesitated. "There is a deadline." "Then the deadline can wait." Maya watched Nathaniel closely. He was not angry. He was calculating. That made the moment more serious. One of his attorneys began reviewing the agreement from the beginning, comparing every definition and reference Maya had mentioned. Another opened a laptop and started checking the corporate records. Maya remained seated, suddenly aware that she was still wearing the same black uniform she had worn while polishing the library that morning. Nothing about her appearance had changed, but the way people looked at her had. Nathaniel noticed it too. "Maya," he said. She looked up. You said you had seen this kind of structure before. She nodded. Where? Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the paper. That question reached farther into her past than she wanted to go. At a law firm in Chicago, she said. A few years ago. Victor's attention sharpened. Maya saw it immediately. Nathaniel did too. What happened there? Nathaniel asked. Maya took a slow breath. The same kind of language was used to move control away from the people who thought they were protected. She looked directly at him. And the person who designed that agreement was never held responsible. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Who was it? Maya looked toward Victor. For the first time, she was no longer wondering whether she should speak. She was wondering whether the room was ready to hear the answer. Maya did not answer immediately. Victor was still standing near the window, his face composed, but the room no longer felt calm. Nathaniel waited without pressing her. That patience made the question harder, not easier. Maya looked down at the contract and remembered a much smaller office. In downtown Chicago, years earlier, where she had believed hard work would always be enough. His name was Daniel Mercer, she finally said. He was a senior attorney at the firm where I worked. Victor's eyes shifted for the briefest moment. Maya noticed. Nathaniel noticed too. What did Mercer do? Nathaniel asked. He designed the agreement, Maya replied. At least, that is what everyone believed.
She paused.
The company that signed it lost control of several major decisions within a year. The same structure was used. Different wording, same pattern. One of Nathaniel's attorneys looked up from the laptop. That case was almost 4 years ago. Maya nodded. Yes. How do you remember the language? The attorney asked. Maya gave a small, tired smile. Because I spent 6 months trying to prove that the problem was in the agreement. The library became quiet again. Nathaniel folded his hands on the desk. And what happened? Maya's expression hardened, not with anger, but with the careful restraint of someone who had repeated an old memory too many times. The firm decided I had misunderstood the contract. They said I had overstepped my role. Mercer signed a statement saying the agreement was standard. Victor spoke for the first time in several minutes. And you accepted that? Maya turned toward him.
No.
I kept looking. Victor's face remained unreadable. Maya continued. I found internal notes showing that the wording had been discussed before the contract was finalized. Someone knew exactly what those clauses could do. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Did you report it? Yes. To whom? The managing partner. Maya paused. 2 days later, I was removed from the case. One attorney quietly closed his laptop. What happened after that? I lost my job. Maya looked toward the shelves of books. I appealed the decision. Nothing changed. I could not afford to keep fighting a firm with more money and more influence than I had. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. There was no sympathy in his expression yet, but there was something else. Attention. Genuine attention. Maya had spent years learning how quickly people stopped listening when a story became inconvenient. Nathaniel had not looked away once. Then one of the attorneys spoke. Nathaniel, I found something. Everyone turned toward him. He held up the laptop. There is a corporate filing connected to Victor's company. The ownership structure was amended 18 months ago. Maya stood. Who filed it? The attorney hesitated. Daniel Mercer. The name seemed to change the temperature of the room. Nathaniel slowly looked at Victor. Victor did not speak. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She had expected a connection. She had not expected the name to appear in the records so quickly. Nathaniel opened another file.
There is more, he said.
Mercer is not just an outside attorney. He is currently advising Victor's company on this transaction. Maya stared at the screen. For years, she had believed the past was behind her. Now it was sitting across the desk, wearing an expensive suit and waiting for Nathaniel to sign the same kind of agreement that had once changed her life. Nathaniel closed the laptop. Maya, he said quietly, I want you to check every page. She looked at the contract again. This time, she did not feel like an employee. She felt like someone who had finally been given a chance to finish what she started. For the next 40 minutes, Maya read every page without saying a word. The library clock moved steadily toward 7, while the last of the daylight faded behind the tall windows. Nathaniel remained at the desk with his attorneys, but every so often his eyes returned to Maya. She was no longer simply reading. She was comparing definitions, tracing references, and marking connections between sections that appeared unrelated at first glance. Then she stopped. There is another problem. Nathaniel looked up immediately. Where? Maya turned the document toward him. The financial reporting section. One attorney leaned closer. It requires quarterly statements. Yes, Maya said. But look at the definition of adjusted earnings. She placed her finger beneath the sentence. They can exclude expenses that are classified as extraordinary. Nathaniel frowned. That sounds common. It would be, except there is no limit on what qualifies as extraordinary. She turned another page. That means they can change the reported numbers after the quarter ends. The attorney began checking the references. Maya continued before anyone could interrupt. And if those adjusted numbers are used to determine whether the performance targets were met, the same party controlling the calculation can influence whether a default occurs. Nathaniel leaned back. So, they control the measurement. Exactly. Victor's voice was quiet. You are making this sound more complicated than it is. Maya looked at him. I am making it precise. Nathaniel's expression remained unreadable. Keep going. Maya returned to the document. There is a third issue. She found a paragraph near the end of the agreement. This notice provision. One attorney shook his head. That is standard language. Maya, read it carefully. Maybe. But the delivery requirement is unusual. Nathaniel looked over.
How?
Notice is considered received when sent, not when acknowledged. The attorney frowned. That is unusual. Maya nodded. And there is no requirement that the receiving party confirm delivery. Nathaniel understood immediately. So, they could claim notice was sent even if nobody saw it. Yes. She pointed to the next sentence. And once that notice is considered effective, the restructuring timeline begins. Silence returned. Nathaniel stood and walked toward the window. Chicago's lights were beginning to appear in the distance, one by one. He looked back at the agreement. 3 separate provisions. Maya nodded. And they all point in the same direction. One attorney finally spoke. This cannot be accidental. Victor looked at him. You are accusing my legal team of misconduct? No, the attorney replied. I am saying the structure deserves further review. Nathaniel turned to Maya. What would you do if this were your contract? Maya answered without hesitation. I would not sign it tonight. Nathaniel nodded once. Neither will I. Victor exhaled slowly. Nathaniel, you are risking a major opportunity because of a housekeeper's interpretation. Maya felt the old sting again, but before she could respond, Nathaniel spoke.
No.
I am delaying an agreement because 3 separate provisions create a pattern my attorneys need to investigate. Victor fell silent. Nathaniel looked at Maya. You said you wanted a chance. Here it is. Maya blinked. What do you mean? He placed another folder on the desk. Find the connection between these clauses and the previous transaction involving Daniel Mercer. Maya opened the folder. The first page contained a familiar company name. The second contained a familiar signature. Then she saw the date. For years earlier. Her hand stopped moving. The same structure was there. But this time, Maya noticed something the old case had never shown her. A 4th clause had been added, and it connected directly to Nathaniel's company. Maya stared at the 4th clause, her thoughts moving faster than the clock on the mantel. The language was different from the earlier agreement, but the structure was familiar. Someone had learned from the old contract and made the new version harder to recognize. Nathaniel stood behind her, reading over her shoulder without interrupting. What does it do? He asked. Maya turned the page slowly. It creates a secondary review process. Meaning, if the agreement is challenged, an outside financial reviewer can determine whether the performance targets were met. One of the attorneys frowned. That sounds protective. It would be, Maya said, if the reviewer were independent. She pointed to the final sentence. But the reviewer is selected from a list provided by the initiating party. Nathaniel's expression changed. Victor's company. Maya nodded. The same pattern again. She reached for the previous agreement. 4 years ago, the clause gave one company control over the review. This version gives them control over who performs the review. The room went quiet. Nathaniel looked toward his attorney. Find every transaction involving Mercer and Victor's company during the last 5 years. The attorney began searching. Maya continued comparing documents.
Dates.
Definitions. Ownership percentages. Names of subsidiaries. Everything seemed separate until she noticed one company appearing in both agreements under different names. Wait. Nathaniel looked at her. Maya placed the 2 pages side by side. This company changed its name 6 months after the old transaction. The attorney checked the corporate records. That is correct. Maya pointed to the registration number. But the registration number did not change. Nathaniel leaned closer. So, it is the same entity. Yes. Victor finally stepped forward. That does not prove anything. Maya looked at him.
No.
It proves a connection. The financial records will tell us what the connection means. Nathaniel gave his attorney a brief instruction. Within minutes, another file appeared on the laptop. The attorney read through it, then looked up. There are payments between the 2 entities. Maya felt the room become still again. How many? Nathaniel asked. 17 documented transfers. Victor's voice remained controlled. Those were legitimate consulting payments. Maya studied the dates. Then why do the transfers begin 3 weeks before the original contract was signed? Victor did not answer. Nathaniel's attorney opened another record. There's something else. He turned the laptop around. Several of these payments were routed through a consulting firm connected to Daniel Mercer. Maya stared at the screen. The name she had spent years trying to forget was suddenly appearing everywhere. Nathaniel looked at her. Is this what you found before? Maya shook her head. Not all of it. I found enough to know something was wrong, but I never had access to these records. Nathaniel was silent for several seconds. Then he asked, what would have happened if you had? Maya looked down at the old agreement. I might have been able to prove it. Nathaniel nodded slowly. And now? Maya looked at the new contract. Now we have a second chance. She turned another page. Her eyes stopped. There was a signature beneath a disclosure statement. Daniel Mercer. But beside his name was another signature. One Maya had not expected to see. Nathaniel Brooks. Maya's breath caught. Nathaniel, she said quietly, you signed something connected to Mercer 4 years ago. Nathaniel looked at the page. His face became completely still. I did not know about this agreement. Maya studied the signature again. Then someone used your name without telling you. No one spoke. For the first time that evening, the problem was no longer only Victor's contract. It reached into Nathaniel's own history. And Maya realized the person who had hidden the truth had been planning far longer than either of them understood. Maya kept staring at the signature. Nathaniel did not move. The library had become so quiet that she could hear the faint hum of the heating system beneath the floor. I never signed an agreement with Mercer, Nathaniel said at last. His voice was controlled, but something in it had changed. Then the signature needs to be verified, Maya replied. She turned the document toward the attorney. Check the original filing, not the copy. The attorney nodded and began searching through the corporate records. Victor remained near the window, silent now. Maya could feel the weight of the room pressing against every word. Nathaniel looked at her. If that signature is not mine, someone created a document that says I approved something I never saw. Yes, Maya said. And if the document was used in another transaction, it could explain how the same structure appeared again. Nathaniel walked back to the desk. How do we prove it? Maya pointed to the filing date. Start with the person who submitted it. Then compare the signature with documents you personally signed that month. The attorney opened another record. There is a filing history. He read through the entries. The document was submitted electronically from an office in downtown Chicago. Maya's eyes narrowed. Which office? The attorney gave her the address. She recognized it immediately. That was Mercer's old office. Victor finally spoke. That does not mean Mercer submitted it. Maya looked at him.
No.
but it means someone with access to his records could have. Nathaniel raised a hand, and the room fell silent. Keep going. The attorney continued searching. There is a second submission from the same office, 6 months later. It concerns a change in the ownership structure of one of Victor's companies. Maya stepped closer. Show me. She read the document carefully. Then she noticed a reference number. She checked the older agreement. The same number appeared there. Her eyes widened. That is the connection. Nathaniel leaned over the desk. Explain. The two transactions were not separate. They were part of the same chain. Maya pointed to the reference number. The old agreement created the structure. The later filing changed the ownership records. This new agreement is designed to activate the same structure again. Nathaniel's attorney looked at Victor. Why would the same reference number appear in both? Victor did not answer. Nathaniel remained completely still. Maya realized something important. Victor was no longer trying to convince them that the contract was harmless. He was simply waiting for something. Nathaniel, Maya said quietly, do not confront anyone yet. He looked at her. Why? Because we do not know how many people are involved. Nathaniel considered her words. What do you suggest? Maya looked at the files spread across the desk. Let them believe the agreement is still being reviewed. Meanwhile, verify every filing, every transfer, and every signature. One attorney nodded. That would give us time to establish a complete record. Nathaniel looked toward Victor. And if we are right? Maya answered. Then whoever created this plan will eventually reveal what they need you to sign. Victor's expression tightened. Nathaniel understood. The safest move was not to accuse anyone. It was to let the paperwork speak for itself. He closed the folder. No one outside this room hears about tonight. Maya stood quietly. For the first time, Nathaniel gave her a look that carried something beyond suspicion or curiosity. It was trust, still incomplete, but real enough to matter. Then the attorney's phone rang. He listened for several seconds before looking toward Nathaniel. The signature verification is complete. Nathaniel waited. It is not yours. The room went silent. Maya looked at Victor. Victor looked at the floor. And Nathaniel finally understood that the contract on his desk was only the beginning. The room remained silent after the attorney confirmed the signature was not Nathaniel's. Maya looked at the contract, then at the records spread across the desk. The answer they had been searching for was finally clear, but it was not the ending she had imagined. It was the beginning of something much larger. Nathaniel spoke first. Verify everything. I want the original filings, the payment records, and every amendment connected to Mercer. His attorney nodded and immediately began organizing the documents. Victor remained near the window, saying nothing. Maya noticed that he no longer looked at her as if she were an inconvenience. He looked uncertain. That change told her more than any explanation could have. There is one more thing, Maya said. Nathaniel turned toward her.
What?
The fourth clause. She picked up the newest agreement. It was added after the original draft was prepared. Nathaniel looked at the document. How do you know? The formatting is different. The definition was inserted later, but the numbering was preserved. One attorney checked the electronic version. His eyes widened. She is right. The clause was added during the final revision. Maya looked at Nathaniel. Who had access to the final revision? The attorney opened the document history. Victor's legal team, Daniel Mercer, and one internal administrator. Nathaniel asked, who? The attorney gave him the name. Maya recognized it immediately. That administrator worked for the company 4 years ago. Correct, the attorney said. And now? Nathaniel asked. Still employed by Victor's company. Nathaniel slowly closed his eyes, then opened them again. He did not need to raise his voice. Call the administrator. Ask for the complete revision history. Victor finally stepped away from the window. Nathaniel, I think we should discuss this privately. Nathaniel looked at him. We are discussing a contract that affects my company. There is nothing private about verifying the records. Victor stopped. Maya watched Nathaniel carefully. The man she had first seen as distant and untouchable was now doing something she had rarely seen powerful people do. He was willing to admit that someone had outmaneuvered him. He was willing to investigate before making accusations. That restraint mattered. The attorney returned a few minutes later with a new file. The revision history is complete. He placed the document on the desk. The fourth clause was added 48 hours before the signing deadline. Maya leaned closer. By whom? The attorney looked at Nathaniel. Daniel Mercer. Maya felt a strange calm settle over her. 4 years of unanswered questions had led to this moment. She had once believed that losing her career meant she had failed. Now she understood that she had simply been forced to walk a longer road before finding the truth. Nathaniel turned toward her. You were right. Maya shook her head gently. The documents were right. I just noticed them. Nathaniel gave a faint smile. Most people would have looked away. Maya looked at the black uniform she was still wearing. I spent years being told I should stay in my place. Nathaniel answered quietly. Your place is not determined by what someone else thinks you are capable of. The words stayed with her. Then he pushed a folder across the desk. Inside was a formal employment offer for a position within his legal and compliance department.
Maya stared at it.
This is not a favor, Nathaniel said. It is an opportunity. You decide whether you want it. Maya looked at the offer, then at the contract that had started everything. She remembered the woman she had been 4 years earlier, sitting alone with a legal file and no one willing to listen. This time, someone had listened. She signed the employment offer the next morning, not because Nathaniel Brooks had rescued her, but because she had finally been given the chance to prove what she already knew. As Maya walked through the mansion's front doors, the morning sunlight stretched across the stone steps. Behind her, the library remained quiet. On the desk, the unsigned contract waited to become evidence rather than an agreement. And for the first time in years, Maya did not feel invisible. She simply felt seen.